All right, everybody. Welcome back to All In with Cassandra and Paula. All right, so this week we're just gonna talk. We're just gonna talk. That's it. We literally just spent 30 minutes talking. And so we're just gonna talk today. And I think, some of this just comes from I think the spaces that we're in is getting clarity. I think it's, you've heard us say life is life and sometimes, and trying to manage other people's stuff, our own stuff at the same time, trying to do all the things, and it's hard. It's frustrating. It's tiring. Uh, yeah, it's tough. And I think we're in a space right now of just all of those things. And I think also when you have other people's stuff that's going on, and when you have life that honestly, whether it's illness, whether it's death, whether it's finances, whether it's relationships, all the things that happen, it's tough. And it can be really hard to sometimes show up. It can be really hard to make decisions. But clarity, I'll just say, I think for is the key in when all these things are happening. Uh, how it gets you to a space of maybe rethinking the things. And I think that's the beauty of this whole, when we talk about all in, right? Is clarity helps you. And sometimes it's probably not what you think you were going to do or say or um, choices you were going to make. But when all these things are happening, it does make it a little bit easier to be a little more clear on what you want to do, how you want to show up. And everybody else may not understand that, but I think that's an important piece.
Well, it's interesting because so I'm one of these, like I put it all out on the table, right, Paul? And you know that. And so I have this pain condition and I tell, I talk about it. It's endometriosis. I've had it for years. And one of the things that makes it worse is stress.
Mhm.
And that makes it where you have to actually think about, how am I spending my time and energy and what can I handle and what can I handle? Because when the stress, and I've had a lot of loss in the last month or so, and, just a lot of things to process. And when you have a pain thing that takes you down and you have this whole list of stuff that you're trying to get done and you feel like you're just you've got this helmet. I think of it as like a big smushy helmet that's on my head that just kind of keeps pushing down on me. And the interesting thing is I had a client email me the other day talking about getting some more individual coaching because she said, how do I manage my time when I'm dealing with health issues? How do I manage my
Mhm.
energy and still be able to go for the things that I want to do in my life and or the goals that I have or feel motivated to even
Yeah.
pursue them when you have days that you just feel like, your
Yeah.
body's against you or whatever. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's mental, emotional, whatever's going on for you. Sometimes those days are really hard.
Yeah.
And the thing that Paul and I were talking about too, but I think sometimes we have to acknowledge that sometimes what we really want is great and we can go for it, but there also has to be balance and there has to be some way to take care of yourself within
Yeah.
it and forgive yourself and not feel bad because you don't feel well and you're trying to do all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And as a performer, and as a leader, and I know Paula talks to this all the time, we have had to learn how to do that. I've had to learn how to get up on stage and be in front of a group or, do whatever when I'm not feeling well
Yeah.
and giving that energy.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I feel like I need to like write a whole blog about this because it's true. And you can see in my eyes, I'm just not, I'm not feeling well today, but we're here anyway, because as we've said before, Paul and I always feel better after we talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know. What else do you have to say, Paula?
Well, here's what I'll say. I think some of this is also about, I do talk about, showing up. And I think that's the beauty in what's happening, even with this, right? Is we still show up, even when we don't feel great. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're pushing through. It's no, we have a commitment. We know that we're going to show up. But to your point, every time by the end, I do feel better. And so there's something to be said for, I'll keep saying it, even when life is lifing, um, showing up, in different spaces, it helps. It really does. And to also know that you're not by yourself. There's real power in sharing. There's real power in having community. There's real power in talking to people. And I think sometimes it's so easy to be in the shell and not come out until we feel better. And the reality is, you know, people are going through very similar things. Unless you talk about it, you don't know. I think this journey that we are on this year, it's tough. And I think we've learned some things. And I think if nothing else, again, I'm gonna go back to the word clarity is helping. And I think we both have talked about the importance of, by the end of this year of things and what that looks like and decisions that will be made. And I think that's so fair in terms of giving us the space and the time to figure it out, but just recognizing I want just people to know that they're just not by themselves. And it's the one thing that I keep finding is um, find your person, find your people, find your community, find somebody. I don't want people to think um, that they don't know or have the ability to share. And I think sometimes this can be really tough, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's your job, or whether it's just life. It's tough. And I think we're all in these seasons where you're trying to figure out the next step and what to do and all the things, and you see other people doing things. And, I always talk about this idea of social media, what you see. But the reality is you don't really know what's going on. So um, showing up is half the battle. It just is half the battle. But when you show up, you never know what you might get, learn. And again, that clarity piece can come from hearing from somebody, sharing with somebody. Um, so show up this week. Yeah, show up. And you might be really surprised at what you find, who you find, and the clarity that may come from it. So um, that's what I got.
That's what you got. So yeah, I think also just being open with about how you're feeling. Sometimes that just helps deflate some of the stress. And I have a tendency personally to cocoon myself and not want to bother anyone when I'm struggling or when I'm having issues with pain or whatever. And I don't, and sometimes that's what I need to do and watch Netflix for a while. But
Yep.
there's other times that what I actually really need is to have a conversation with somebody and just give it a voice.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also part of the work is, owning your voice, even on days that it doesn't feel like it,
Yes.
like doesn't feel like you or doesn't feel like you, if you're not at your best, then you shouldn't
Yeah.
put it out there.
Yeah.
I think that that's the world I want to live in is a world where we can be all the things that we are in any given moment and be okay.
Yep. You got it.
Um, and I think on a funny note, emails. Paula, do you want to talk about emails?
Ah, yeah, sure. Let's close out on that. So here's the thing with emails. We are inundated. We are inundated. Y'all see how it rolls up? We are inundated with emails. The number of people, organizations that send emails sometimes three, four times a day. We were talking about the number of email accounts that we have and trying to manage all the emails. And it's a lot. And you recognize that at some point you're going to have to unsubscribe. I just got finished saying I'm going to have to unsubscribe to some emails just because I cannot manage it. It's too much, and I don't get a chance to read things. And I know people will say, well, just create a rule and put it in the folder. For what? What's going to happen is going to be in the folder, and I'm never going to read it. And so it's one of those things where I think emails have become. I know it's important in terms of getting information out. You all, it has become unnerving. It really is too much, and I think that's another piece of what we call the stress of trying to get through all the emails. On average, I'm probably getting somewhere between 150 to 200 emails a day between all of my email accounts. Now, I'm not talking about the generic one that we all have. I'm talking about the personal or the business accounts that, that accounts that we have. It's just a lot. And so that is absolutely a piece of stress that comes, I know with anything that we do, but it absolutely is increasing our stress. So we got to stop with that. I recognize there are people who be like, oh, but you have to do that. Nah, not quite sure I agree with that. Because some of y'all about to get unsubscribed. I'm just saying.
Well, and I and to kind of, bounce off of that or bounce the email back. No, just kidding. The the thing is because I talk a lot in my workshops and speeches that I do about impact. And I want you to really think about your experience of receiving emails
Mhm.
and think about how when you are sending them,
Mhm.
think about what the experience of the person on the other side is. So if
Exactly.
you're sending 3 emails a day about the same thing and you're doing that day after day after day, how would you feel?
Yep.
And then multiply that by 50 because maybe you're subscribed to a whole bunch of different email lists of content that you may actually really want.
Yep.
But when you get inundated to the point where you're like, it becomes almost where you're like, I'm done with this because you're getting so much of it, it does not have impact anymore. Then
Exactly.
it just becomes irritating.
Yep.
And I understand that you want to get your stuff out there, but I'm going to say, think about what the impact is on the person that's constantly receiving
Right.
those emails and then multiply it by however many you think they're probably getting and ask yourself what you do with them
Yep.
and make sure that you're being very intentional
Yeah.
about your why and
Yeah.
also the impact that those have because marketing is important. I am not saying it isn't, but sometimes it can be too much. Yes, Paula?
And with that, here's what we're gonna say. So, number one, show up. Number two, own your voice, you all. And number three, if you all are sending out emails, take a step back and rethink what your strategy is. Because for some people, it's not working. All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.